Welcome to today's Solera Networks webinar, What Just Happened? Respond Faster to Today's Threats. My name is Alan Hall. I'm the Director of Marketing at Solera Networks, and we also have with us Ryan Smith, our Principal Systems Engineer, who will walk us through a bit of a demo after I've had a chance to cover a few slides. So, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the threat landscape. I think we're all familiar with these malware botnets, insider threats, data breaches, targeted attacks. You can call them what you may. Bottom line is these are the things that we have to deal with on a regular basis. I think that the common theme here is that we're seeing a new generation of threats, next generation threats that are out there, and they exhibit various characteristics. First of all, chances are they're going to be able to go beyond our current defenses. They know what our networks look like. They know, what we've got in place, and they are specifically designed to subvert the means that we have to protect our environment. So they're also becoming more persistent. They're adding a time dimension to it, and by that I mean that they're not going to go away. They're going to continue to attack us, and they're going to continue to be patient as they attack our network. On top of that, they're multi-stage, multi-vector attacks. They're going to morph and change the way that they are attacking our networks, whether that be insiders or malware. They're out there trying to hide their true identity. We're also noticing a lot of evasive applications, meaning that the applications are trying to find non-traditional ways to get in using, not using standard ports. So we've got to be particularly vigilant about identifying the application, not necessarily the path that it's crossing. And ultimately, they've got complex motives. I think the attacker themselves have changed, and it includes your basic theft. But we're now seeing a lot more around espionage and attacks that are out to, achieve political gain. Now, this is, I think, kind of a startling visual on the volume of threats that we've been experiencing in recent months. We're all familiar, a while back, probably a year and a half or so ago, Operation Aurora, the WikiLeaks situation. But I think if you look at what has been happening recently, from all the way from the RSA security breach and their secure ID, their tokens and so forth, Nintendo PBS, even InfraGard, some of the organizations that we feel have real strong security posture are becoming targets. And this is the environment that we're currently living in. Now, for each of those attacks, I can only imagine that there's a conversation that goes on between, say, the CIO or the CISO or other executives and the security and incident response team, and that might very well be you. But these are the questions that you probably dread to hear. Who did this to us? How did they do it? What systems were impacted? Why didn't you catch it earlier? Can we be sure that it's over? And can we be sure it won't happen again? And if the answer is still, we don't know, I'm sure that causes great concern with you and others in the organization. Now, I like this model from security research firm Nemertes. They've kind of called out this concept of comprehensive threat protection, that essentially it requires a balance of, 4 key elements: controls, tools to protect us from what we know to be bad; monitoring, tools to help us alert us when something has been bad based on the signature of some type; analysis tools, helping us uncover the source and scope of what happened with regard to that attack; and then mitigation, steps necessary to remediate and fortify the network. And then that goes back into the control element, and it helps us improve our ability to protect against things that we've come across or signatures that we now know about. But according to Nemertes, unfortunately, there's been too much attention and focus on the controls, and we end up with an unbalanced threat protection environment. So that means monitoring, analysis, and mitigation are taking somewhat of a back seat, and we're not really getting better at protecting our environment. Now, that's got to change, obviously. And we're seeing a shift and a change in the perception with the customers and prospects that we talk to that the investment in controls only will protect us, and that needs to change. But we are seeing that change, I think, with the people that we're talking to. Now, a friend of mine loves to do what he calls chalk talk. When he's talking to security teams, he kind of uses this type of an example. Let me kind of walk you through it. If we've got the right tools, expertise, and data, that's going to help us, come to a solid resolution. So, first of all, we have our sensor fabric out there, things that kind of are in that control environment and maybe somewhat in the monitoring environment as well. But you got your DLP, IDS, IPS, next generation firewall, SIM, and so forth, and various others that are out there. But we can come in during the day and maybe there's no alert. And if there's no alert, fine, nothing happened and we can move on. But in the event that there's an alert out there, we obviously have to take some type of an action. Now, what are our options? We can choose to ignore it and hope that nothing has happened to our organization. Or the right thing to do probably is choose to investigate. Now, we might come to a dead end, and that could be due to lack of know-how or lack of data. And again, if that's the case, then what do? Chances are we might ignore it and hope that nothing bad's happened to our organization. But if we have the know-how, we can choose to investigate. But if we have partial data, then we're going to be able to see some of what happened in the organization. Now, for those items that we don't know about, chances are we're going to ignore and hope that it doesn't have any ill effects on our network. But for those things that we can fix, we will fix those, and we think that we're safe with regard to those elements that we've been able to address and fix. But we also have to go back to step one and see, are there any additional alerts that are going to come forward and into our view and that we need to spend some time investigating on. Now let's go back over here we have the know-how, which I'm certain that we all do who are on the call here, very skilled security professionals. If we have the full data, we're able to find the root cause of the security event. We're able to plug the holes. We're able to verify the fix and what we've implemented to protect us in the future. And then we have the ability to take further action. So again, I think with the right tools, expertise, and data, that helps us come to a solid resolution. So what is it that we do here at Solera Networks? I think we have a good understanding that your security teams are challenged and that you guys often feel that you are behind when it comes to the latest threats and attacks. The attackers have a head start on doing bad things to your organization. What we do is we arm you with complete, clear, and concise information about every attack. Most importantly, we give you the ability to go back in time to reproduce any event and deliver evidence so that you actually know what the full source and scope is of that attack. Now, if you have the right data, you are then able to reduce the time to resolution, minimize loss, and fortify your network from further attack. And I would argue that this then helps us balance that comprehensive threat protection model that Nimriti's pointed out on the previous slide. So what are the keys to network forensics, which is kind of that analysis section of that model from Nimriti's? To be effective and have that full view of everything on your network and be able to use that data to resolve issues, security issues on your network, there's some important steps. First, you have to have the ability to collect and classify 100% of the traffic on your network. Your investigation is only as good as your ability to get your hands on all of the data. If you don't have all the data, then your investigation is going to be suspect and not complete. Now, once you've been able to do that and also classify and index the information, that then makes step two here much more effective. That gives you the ability to report, visualize, and reconstruct, see the data, analyze the data that you've captured, and then finally, with that analysis, you're able to remediate and deter against further attacks because you've essentially strengthened some of your control systems based on the new information that you have at your disposal. So a little bit about network forensics and how the analysts view this space. They might view it slightly differently, and I think that's really more in name only. Gartner calls it network forensics. They put out a market note on network forensics and in the process of updating that now, and we should see that in the next month or so. Forrester calls it network analysis and visibility. But if you look at it and what they're saying about it, they make a couple important points. First of all, the highest value use case is proactive situational awareness. That's essentially constant monitoring of your network and reacting to the data that you've captured, and having a full understanding of what's going on in your network. However, the most common use case is going to be post-incident analysis or on-demand investigations. You know that something went bad on your network, and you then go back and uncover the true source and scope of it by reviewing that historical data. Now, Gartner points out that there's some key criteria when in evaluating a solution. One, its performance, the response time, both I would argue in capturing all of the data and then examining that data, particularly on large volumes of stored data. And on top of that, the overall analytical capabilities, the ability to get back into the data and make sense of it, because your investigation is effective only if you have the ability to really dive into that haystack of data that you've created and find that needle. But if you do have that key analytical capabilities in place, you're going to then come to a resolution much faster. Again, Forrester calls it network analysis and visibility, but John Kinderback at Forrester had stated that if you've got this infrastructure in place, it does make it difficult for attackers to be invisible. They might still perform malicious activities, but you at least have full visibility into everything and can stop their activities much sooner and fortify your networks against further attacks. We heard this statement at a recent Gartner security conference, and from a Fortune 500 CISO. He said, I want my security tools to work together. The big vendor silo works well together, but not with the other tools in my stack. And that's key, and that's something really I think that differentiates Solera Networks. We pride ourselves in the ability to integrate directly with the best-of-breed technologies. One that we'll focus on a little bit more today is FireEye and their malware detection, malware protection solution. But we do have integrations with our Open REST API with Splunk, Palo Alto Network, McAfee, just announced Q1 Labs here, SourceFire, ArcSight, SonicWall, and others. And the Firefox logo there indicates that we've got what we call the universal connector, which allows you to essentially through a browser plugin in Firefox go directly from data that you might have in any other security tool that you're managing through a browser and pivot from, say, timestamps of an alert or source IP, destination IP, and pivot directly over into a Solera Networks forensics appliance for further investigation. We might talk a little bit more about that in a moment here. Now, you might be asking, okay, well, so what is it you have? Well, we've got network forensics appliances that are very easy to deploy in your environment. You can see that it's just sitting here in a standard configuration off of a tap or a span port. The red box there you can see is a third-party security device that is probably sitting in line, trying to identify events based on known signatures, heuristics, or patterns, or behavior, and so forth, and alerting you that something maybe has gone wrong. Well, we're capturing all the data surrounding that, and we can pivot directly off that third-party device and perform a more detailed investigation. On the right-hand side, off the little computer there, browser, that's where you dive in and can perform your investigations, and we'll see that in the demo here. But you get reports, geolocation, see exactly where things are happening geographically, where your traffic is coming from, extractions, actually pulling out the actual artifacts from the raw packet data. So how does that how does network forensics work, and what use cases, where would it be useful? Well, here's a few, and I'm not going to cover them all in too much detail, but there's really four kind of main areas. Incident response. This is all about identifying that something bad happened on your network and determining the root cause, essentially kind of a T-0 analogy or method of what happened before I got that alert. And then that kind of really dovetails into kind of the outbreak and pathway analysis of knowing what happened after that alert. So malware got in the organization, how did it get in? Once it got in the organization, what did it do? And those fit under incident response. Situational awareness, application discovery, seeing exactly what's crossing your network, what applications are taking up your bandwidth, what applications are potentially causing your security threats, getting a full view of that. Also data loss discovery, what was pulled from the organization, what was stolen. Insider threat analysis. This is essentially keeping employees honest because you've got a full view as to what's going on with employee activity. And that kind of fits in also to acceptable use policy and particularly like P2P content download, protecting the organization from, legal action against them, making sure that employees are downloading appropriate content, not copyrighted content. And then on top of that, inappropriate content discovery. So this might be around acceptable use policy. Are they viewing things they shouldn't be viewing during business hours and on company equipment? And then finally, security assurance. This is kind of unique, the ability to replay traffic to new IDS signatures. I've updated my kind of control environment that's alerting me. Now what I can do is take my actual network traffic and replay it to those signatures to validate that those tools are being very effective. And then finally, around compliance and reporting, providing, proving the negative. So identifying that all these measures that I've taken to secure my network and identify the actual threats, I've actually got evidence and I can prove that essentially the coast is clear, that we've been able to eradicate that particular threat, we've been able to deal appropriately to that particular attack. Here's a specific use case. This is one of our key customers who shall remain nameless, but they're a large government agency, protecting a lot of our nation's infrastructure. And, traditionally it took them about 51 man-hours to identify the source and scope of malware within their organization. But once they deployed network forensics in the environment, they were able to reduce the time to identify that malware and remediate down to less than 3 hours. So very effective. That eliminates employee downtime, helps reduce your exposure from further risk because you're essentially closing that window much quicker. Let's shift gears a little bit. We mentioned that on this particular webinar we wanted to highlight a little bit about our partner FireEye. So you may or may not be familiar with FireEye, but they've got a fabulous product that provides real-time malware protection and particularly help with dealing with zero-day attacks, and they pride themselves in having near zero false positives, and then automated blocking of malware. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that dovetails in nicely with what we do with the ability to record, index, replay, and reconstruct all of the traffic around any particular network event. So the combined solution helps us find the root cause of malware infections and be able to close that vulnerability much more quickly. It also helps with persistent and widespread infections. These are longer, slow type of attacks. Helps us visualize the full extent of the attack and provide complete remediation. And because we've got the integrated workflow, that gives you, the ability to go directly from their alert, and it helps us improve the time to resolution. And this is all possible because of, patented technologies that we offer, as well as what FireEye offers. With their VM filtering technology, and then our DSFS, our file system, which is kind of at the core. So this slide here, you saw this before, but I just wanted to point it out that FireEye then becomes that third-party security tool that is there identifying threats and able to feed us some intelligence to help begin our investigation. You can see the third-party interface there. That's a FireEye interface, and we can go directly from that into the investigation. A little bit more about the process with FireEye. The way that I understand it, there's a kind of a three-phase approach here. First of all, they focus on aggressively capturing data relevant to potential threats in this HTML files, identifying PDFs and executables, and they maximize the capture to help mitigate the potential of zero-day attacks. What they essentially do then in phase two is put that into their virtual machine analysis, and I kind of think of it as this is the sandbox, if you will, where they're going to put those PDFs and executables in there, and they're going to let them do their thing, unleash their fury, if you will. And then once they see exactly the results of that file or executable, then they can determine and make a confirmation as to whether or not that's a malicious attack. And then based on that, moving into step three, then they can do things about it. They can block the callbacks and essentially protect the organization from threat of that malware. So once we've identified that information from FireEye, that then becomes a pivot point from FireEye into a Solera DS appliance, and that's where we can have more intelligence around investigation, and then we can drop into deep sea, and that's going to give us more depth and clarity in our investigation and see kind of the scope of what happened before, what happened after this malware came into the organization. And with that full source and scope, we can determine how exactly we need to respond to that particular threat. Here's actually an example of a joint customer of ours. They are a major web retailer, again, who shall remain nameless. Most of our customers prefer to remain nameless, and we honor that. But this particular customer here had an issue with hit by a zero-day attack. They didn't really know the extent of the attack, and they had to establish measures to detect and protect against further attacks. So they were lucky enough to have a FireEye malware analysis appliance in place. They were evaluating incoming threats. They did identify a malware attack, and based on that information, we were able to then, with the Solera DS3200 forensics appliance that was in there capturing all the data as corresponding to that attack, we were able to then go in very quickly and identify the source and scope. So FireEye identifies that, yes, malware came in the organization. What we do at Solera Networks is provide context of that. How did they get in? What was the extent of the infiltration? Where did it go throughout the organization? Is it still there? What nodes did it hit? How do I need to respond, and what's the extent of cleanup that we need to perform on the network? So essentially the result was they were able to quickly remediate the threat across the entire network because they had a full view of it. So quote from them, by using root cause analysis, cutting the chase here, we're able to completely prevent that exploit from ever happening again in the future. They knew exactly what it was going to look like. They knew how they needed to further secure their environment. I'm going to wrap up here in a moment and pass the baton over to Ryan, but I just want to close with a couple quick slides. Here's the makeup of our product offering at Solera Networks. We offer at the entry level a virtual appliance, a virtual network forensics appliance, which is actually unique in the industry, and Solera Networks is the only one that is able to do this. But that's great for small to remote organizations. Moving over to the right, kind of the high-end appliance is the DS5200 with 10 gigabit capture and 16 terabytes of onboard storage. But we also have the ability to scale beyond that with the head-end unit, the DSH200, with the same capture and performance capabilities, but you have the ability to add additional storage in the form of DS storage up to, I believe, 200 terabytes or so of JBOD units, or plug it into a SAN. Then on top of that, we have a centralized management unit, the DSC200, so that you can manage the appliances and also manage and perform investigations from the single management console. So in closing, before I hand this over to Ryan, I just wanted to highlight some of our strengths at Solera Networks. Performance and scalability. From the ground up, we've been built to handle the demanding speeds of the largest networks, up to 10 gigabits per second. And then also largest networks in terms of scale. You know, again, up to 200 terabytes through JBOD and even beyond that. And we've got some customers that are retaining 6 months worth of traffic in their environment. Then response time and reporting and visualization. This is because of our powerful indexing capability. We're able to very quickly give you the data back, give it to you in intuitive ways so that you can make sense of the data that you've captured and what you need to do to take action. You know, our Open REST API is again a strength that we have in the industry. Our ability to partner with the best of breed technologies out there, technologies that you probably already have in place or considering, like FireEye. And then application classification and description. Our ability to identify and classify up to 530 different applications along with the metadata surrounding that. So not only do you have the raw packets, but you've got some intelligence as to what do those packets make up. And that's going to then you know, speed up your investigation significantly. And then finally, as I mentioned, the virtual appliance. So with that, turn some time over to Ryan here in a moment. But first, I just want to mention that you actually have the ability to try this out for yourself through the Solera Networks Virtual Appliance and DeepSea for 30 days. Just visit our website, soleranetworks.com. I'll also point out that there'll be a survey at the end of the webinar here that you'll get via email. We'd encourage you to fill that out, and from that, we will select one winner to receive a $50 Amazon.com gift certificate. So we will have some questions at the end, but now let me turn the time over to Ryan Smith.
All right, thank you, Alan.
Ryan, are you there?
I am.
Take it away. Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Well, we'll walk through some of those use cases here, and then we'll walk through an actual FireEye case to wrap everything up with. So as we mentioned to start out with, one of the main uses of the device is situational awareness. So what's going on your network? What types of traffic are you seeing? What types of applications? What are certain users doing? So as you come into the appliance, you've got a summary screen where you can add the different widgets that you would like in here. There's about 30 different reports that you can choose from. So you just simply add a different report onto there, and you'll instantly get kind of a dashboard readout of that data. And each of these reports you can then adjust whether or not you want to look at packets, sessions, or bytes, ascending or descending, or you can make them look pretty for dashboards with pretty pictures in there. But essentially what we're talking about is just giving you enough data to get an idea of what's happening different on your network. And as you click into the individual reports, then you get the full set of data. You've got your pie chart, but you also got a histogram that's going to show you the number of sessions that you've had going across certain periods of time. And you got the ability to adjust your reporting based off of the different packets or sessions or bytes that you're looking for, and really look for very specific data. You've also got the ability to filter out certain types of data. So, in one of the things that I get questions about all the time is, so TCP is a much lower level OSI layer than the HTTPS. So if I want to see what my true throughput is on things, I can eliminate that by doing a not equals to TCP, and we take that data out, and we get kind of a little bit different view of what your actual full traffic is looking like. So as you can see, we've got a lot of SSL and HTTPS traffic going on through that. And then the other thing is taking a look at maybe even your geolocation data, see where your traffic's going to and from. And again, these are areas that we index on. So the index is a much faster read than going through PCAP data. So because we're reading only a tenth of the amount of data that we're capturing, you get reports back very quickly. And in most cases, you're looking at an hour to 15 minutes of time, or even 24 hours. So you're not even reading the entire index. You're reading portions of that. And one of those things that we do index on is country. So again, I can do things like filter from my path bar. I can eliminate certain things. So what if I don't want to see China or the Netherlands or Kazakhstan or Australia? In this case, we can do Australia. If I can type, add that in there, and then we update that data, and we get a different view of our maps. And apparently I spelled Australia wrong, so that's probably why. I think it needs capitals. So then we can also go take a look at additional data around compliance and acceptable use. So in this case, acceptable use, maybe we see some BitTorrent traffic. Is this legitimate BitTorrent traffic? So I can filter on that as well. And as I update my path bar, I'm filtering that down, and all my reports now are going to reflect data around BitTorrent traffic. So you see we do have some additional data that's in there regarding some HTTP traffic with what looks like some announcement updates for our hashes. We can see the different HTTP servers that are being used for our tracking devices. And we can even go into the HTTP URLs, and we see the hash in there. We can go search on that hash to figure out what exactly that BitTorrent is, and verify whether or not it's legal or not. One of the other things that's interesting within there is to kind of take a look at maybe what a certain user is doing. So in this case, we can come back in to our data. Let's expand our time frame out a little bit. Give it 20 minutes or so, and let's add in one of our pre-filtered things that we look at a lot of times. So we're going to add that, update our time frame, and we're going to get a view of the traffic of what this one person has been doing. And in this case, it's kind of, we can maybe see something interesting where we're looking at what files did a person touch. So these can come from anywhere. One of the ones that you see at the very top comes out as a file sitting on documents and settings, desktop and top secret.doc. So we can actually even go in and extract that data out, look at that document, see if we can figure out what was in that doc, and verify whether or not certain data has escaped our network even. So if we scroll down on this data here, we'll find our Word document within our extracted files. So these files this is actually going into the portion where we put the PCAP back together. We actually recreate a file. You've got all the MD5 hashes related to it. You've got any referring data that's happening, the type of application that it is. In this case, it's a Word document. We can download that artifact. We can go ahead and open that up with Word and view our actual top secret document and see what kind of data somebody is sending out of the network. One of the other things that's pretty interesting as far as looking at sets of data based off of, say, let's go back a few steps here, and we're going to go back to this set of data here. If we go ahead and look at extractor again, we've got a bunch of data in here. As far as maybe HR compliance type of data, we can come in and take a look at, see if there's anything in our media panel. Our extracted view here. Looks like we got a little out of whack on time here. Let's update that and see if we can get some more images coming across our set of data here. So we can just to display the media panel, shows all the pictures that we're extracting as it's pulling out data through the extraction portion of this device. Looks like my VM is only pulling up some minor GIFs that are pulled out in that time frame. So, but you get the idea that if you have a whole bunch of pictures under there, that's what they'll look like. All right, so then the other thing we can do is when we're taking a look at, say, security assurance, we want to see maybe what data has gone somewhere, or if we've communicated with certain IPs on our network. So we can come into our reports, take a look at our IP destinations. We get a list of all of our IPs that are out there, And we can do filtered searches within here, trying to look for data around, say, do we have anything in a 201.6.6 address? Maybe this is some known bad addresses. We can filter on those. And at that point, we see that we have communicated with that. I can filter again off of one of those into my path bar, update that, and then take a look at any of my IP conversations that are associated with that particular user and tell who's been communicating on the inside with that. So if we had, maybe some known botnet addresses out there, we can take a look at all the users that would have been communicating with that person or with that device on the outside. And finally, we're going to jump over into our FireEye demo here. So in FireEye, we've got an identified piece of malware, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of activity that happened with this particular malware as it came in. You're going to see that we see a web infection, and FireEye is going to give us quite a bit of information about these things. It's going to give us, we can see where our URLs came from. It's going to tell us some of the things that it used to exploit. So it looks like we had Acrobat Reader open up, and that was one of the uses. One of the exploits was some type of a PDF that came through, and we're going to get the different types of infections that happen. We've got some binary analysis that occurs. We've got, if we take a look at the binaries, we can come down and see maybe in this case we've got a file named p2p.exe that came from this inject13.cocc domain. So useful information. It's some place for us to start, but one of the things that this is not telling us, and the gap that Solera fills, is how did this person get this infection? Where did they go before this? And what was actually exploited on the machine? What was the actual exploit? The only thing we've got in here is it's telling us that Acrobat Reader has been exploited, but generally something happens even before that, and what we want to do is try to figure out what that data is. So we see that we have an actual executable. We've got an MD5 hash, so we're going to copy that out. And what FireEye has done, and what some of our other vendors have done, is built in links directly into our device. So you can either download the PCAP that's around this, or we can click on the forensics button and jump directly into Deep Sea. And we're going to get a pre-filter based off of this IP address and this time frame. We're actually going to go back a little bit in time because we want to see maybe what that person was doing, a few minutes before that. We don't know exactly what happened before that time frame. So we'll take and expand that a little bit. Let's update that. And we're going to get a view, kind of a quick overview of what that is. And one of the things I like to do is create some different views of data within here. So when I'm looking for malware, there's certain reports that I want to see. And there's some interesting data that we see along here. So we're seeing mostly HTTP, some HTTPS data. We see that our country initiator has come from our NA is going to be an internal IP address. We see some responders out here, and these may or may not be useful. Depends on what your business is like. In this case, we've got some Ukraine and Bosnia, Herzegovina, Ireland, and some Russian Federation stuff. So there's some places that we might want to be looking for data within here. Remember we had a file in here called p2p.exe. So one of the things we can do to verify that whether or not we've actually captured that is go ahead and just look for p2p in there, and we do see that actual executable. We see how big it is and what the time frame that it passed through right in here. So that definitely tells us that we've got something worth investigating. So what we'll do is jump into the extractor pieces. This is really where the tool that root cause analysis is really designed around. So remember we had an MD5 hash that we got from FireEye. So we can go ahead and copy that in and see if we can find that. And we do. So we actually have that executable. We've got the hash that's in there. We can run that against known databases. We've got different IP addresses that we can filter on if we want to. Again, we can look at geolocation within this, and that again was that that Ukraine pop that we saw, that something that we probably don't want to see. But what we want to do now is try to figure out how do we go backwards from here? How do we find where this came from? So I happen to know, because I do a lot of investigations, that anything that comes from the COCC domain is probably a bad thing to be seeing on my network. So what I want to do is take a look at anything that has the URL COCC within it, and we'll clear out our display filter of our MD5 so we see all the traffic. Let's add a few more rows of data into here, and we'll scroll down until we see our actual P2P file in here. So this is the get for that file. So one of the things we can do is look for, see if there's any kind of a referrer within there, and we also want to investigate what maybe that user agent is. And in this case, we see no user agent, which is very suspicious. It lets us know that it wasn't using a browser or Java or some type of application that's going to pass the user agent data in a normal manner. We also have no referring agent, no referring document, so we're not really sure where that came from. But because we have everything in chronological order, we can kind of just visually walk our way backwards until we start to figure out how this person got to this place. And then we'll come back and try to figure out what the actual exploit was. So my first order of business is, did they go here on purpose, or was this some sort of drive-by? So if I walk backwards up to this area, we finally start to see some referring data, and we can see that it came from this Ultimate 11 COCC domain. So we see that one up here. And if we look at the referring on this, we've got this manifest.com site. So I want to take a look at what those are. Maybe I want to take a quick preview on here, look at the get a little more information. At this point, we see that we were using a Mozilla 5 user agent, Firefox 356 at the end here. So we know that something definitely happened in between there. And we do see that we find this referrer of manifest.com and 20 fat people wearing spandex. So that could be a dangerous view of the media panel if we pull that one up. So let's go add in our manifest data, and let's see if we can figure out if there was actually a link in there. I thought I copied that, but I didn't. Manifest. Let's add that URL in there. So now we're displaying data from both of those. And we had, an interesting, fairly unique keyword in ultimate11.cocc that we can search for. So let's go ahead and just see if we can find a link with Ultimate 11 in it off of manifest, and we see that we have the main Ajax JavaScript file is what pops up in here. So somewhere in that page is the word Ultimate 11. So I'm going to bring up a preview of that. It's a text previewer. We can format that data into JavaScript so we can see what's going on in here. And if you look through this, this is essentially a normal Ajax, what's going on with your web browser, what type of web browser you're using so you know what to present to you, type of JavaScript file is very typical for most websites these days. And so what we want to do then is just let's pull up our find, and we'll try to see if Firefox find will try to actually type. I don't know why it wants to not, but some sort of bug in 5. But I happen to know that it's down at the bottom here. So we find Ultimate 11 down at the bottom of this actual page. So it was part of our keyword search. And you'll notice that this has been kind of an obscured URL. And if you step back just a little bit, there's a function that's been added into this particular JavaScript file that has added in an obscured iframe injection to this file. So essentially this site got hacked. There was no real link in here that somebody followed. They just had a drive-by link. This opens up a one-by-one iframe that redirects to Ultimate 11 COCC. So now what we want to do is try to figure out what was exploited. We know there's nothing within manifest that's really going to be of use to us at this point. So basically what happens is we're going to follow this down. If we preview what's happening within here, we see that we just get redirected to another site. And again, right after that, we see another HTTP redirect. And eventually we come down through these secondary 21s. And these were some of the things that were talked about. We saw this actual index PHP and some of these exploits as part of our binary analysis within FireEye. And again, so we saw that we had an opening of Acrobat, so we see this PDF that's in here. So we know that's bad, but there was some stuff that happens right before that. So we see some octet streams and some gets. So one of the things we want to look at in that is looking at our get. We're going to see we're now using Java 1.6.14. So something happened previous to that, that we've switched from HTTP using Firefox to using Java to download stuff now. So if we take one quick step back to the one just before there, we can take a look at the hex within this, or the text within this. And this is essentially just some more obscured JavaScript that's just trying to overwhelm the browser. So essentially what happens is nasty JavaScript happens. It looks for certain things, and it exploits it by launching JavaScript. And the reason it launches JavaScript is if you actually look at one of these octet streams, they end up being jar files. And within the jar file, we're going to actually find some interesting data here. So we're going to see what it's actually trying to load. And MIDI device provider is one of the things that Java is loading in there. And this is something that we didn't get pointed out in FireEye, is that they didn't even show that Java got kicked off at all, number one. And number two, it doesn't show what it's kicking off. And if you look up Java 1.6.14 and CVE articles, you'll find that there is a known exploit of the MIDI device provider. So all those hackers did was launch its script, JavaScript, that looked to see what version of Java was running, and they ran an exploit against the known vulnerability, which then kicks off this PDF exploit. So essentially, what we were able to tell the customers, they needed to update their JavaScript or their Java versions in order to protect and mitigate from further occurrences of these types of attacks. And so what Solera does is really just fill that gap. It gives you the how and the why and what happened before and the full picture versus, hey, here's a log, here's a bad machine, let's just go ahead and image that machine and we'll move on to the next time that happens. You know, preventing it from happening further in the future is really the key to preventative security. So with that, we'll throw it back out to the audience for questions and Q&A. So the question is, does Solera hash and process all files it comes in contact with, or is it manual? It is a manual process. You have to tell it to kick off the extraction. So it does not create a real-time hash database, as it were. It does it as the extraction is kicked off.
Great. Hey, sorry there. I just realized I was on mute. But Ryan, I've got another question here that I think looks interesting. I'm curious to know the practicality of a multi-port, multi-switch solution. More specifically, in addition to monitoring traffic going through our gateway, we'd also like the flexibility to monitor traffic localized on each individual switch. Is that something that could be done with the Solera Network solution? How would we handle a multi-switch solution?
So
I know that we work with.
We have multiple capture ports, so ranging from 2 to 8 ports of capture on each device. So you could definitely send multiple feeds to our device, and you can filter based off of the capture interface to look at individual data. Your overall view would end up being all data, and then you could filter off of interface, a capture interface to look at certain traffic types.
Certain segments, so very good. Another question here. Does Solera hash all files that it comes in contact with, or is the hashing?
We just answered that one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That's right. Let's see, one other here. What types of application traffic does your product identify? How many? And is it customizable? I think we briefly touched upon that, but we've got, what, 28 families of applications 532.
We identify over 500 application types,
Yeah.
and those are, beyond even just HTTP. We're looking at applications that run over HTTP, as well as things like Samba, FTP, CIFS. Pretty much you name it, it's in the DPI engine. It is not a customizable engine at this point, so you can't turn certain ones on and off automatically. We identify every application, and then we have chosen the common metadata points, the most common metadata points needed within there that we do indexing on. So metadata would be, in the case of something like SMTP, which would be the application type, you would have metadata associated with that as the sender, the email sender, email recipient, file name, any file name attachments, a subject line, those type of things.
Great. Also, I want to point out that we have what we call Deep Sea Live, which essentially provides you with updates to those applications as they're made available periodically through a subscription. I think we might have time for one or so more questions. Does the virtualized option allow the ability to monitor more than 8 ports? Meaning if I have 12 NIC ports on my VM, could I monitor each simultaneously?
No. Theoretically, you could add more. We have not tested with more than 4 capture ports. There's a lot of limitations within VMware, generally due to hypervisor as well as disk speed constraints when you're talking about virtual environments. You can run multiple VMs within there. There's also ways to set up virtual switches where you can monitor multiple switches with a single port.
Okay, so maybe time for one more question here. Question, while investigating or searching or replaying traffic, does the Solera appliance continue to capture?
Yes. We are constantly capturing. We never turn capture off unless you request it turned off.
Good. That's a very important point, because obviously the key to any effective investigation is ensuring that you have all of the data. So, stopping that capture while you're doing a different investigation could jeopardize your ability to find the answers on something else that's crossing your network. So, well, with that, I'd like to thank everybody. Again, I'd like to remind everybody of the 30-day trial over at SoleraNetworks.com. Feel free to download that for yourself and try out Deep Sea, as well as keep your eyes open for that email that will be coming through with the survey, and we'll be selecting and notifying one winner. So with that, again, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next webinar.